I'm going to go ahead and start a series about things that you can do to make a political impact, but it's not just voting. Let's go. First, I want to say that I bought 3 kufias that are gorgeous and wonderful and in all different colors from the shop that I'm going to link below. Do your little clickety-click, your little scrollity-scroll, get yourself a little present, get one for a friend, and just support an amazing cause while you're at it. All money that I may make from this video is going directly back to the watermelon place. One of the most foundational things we can do to make a political difference is contribute to mutual aid, and there are funds all around for all different causes. For instance, there might be a mutual aid fund in your community for people experiencing houselessness, and this could be either to get rent paid or to get them propane tanks for heating while they are having to be transient and camping as opposed to being in actual housing. It could also be for something like trans mutual aid and getting gender affirming care, or abortion mutual aid and making sure that people are getting the healthcare they need. Some places have mutual aid funds for community fridges and making sure that those stay filled and cleaned and serviced in ways that they need to, as well as being able to just do things like spread awareness and make sure that people have food and know that it is something that is available to them. Mutual aid is just that. It is mutual. When you contribute, it also means that you are part of the community. So giving even just a little bit here and there, it could really mean that maybe someday when you're down on your luck, they're able to help you too. It's about community. It's not about charity or pity or performativity. It's about putting money into the pockets of the people who need it and making sure that they are getting the resources they need. Your community may already have mutual aid funds, and if they don't, make one. It can be as easy as setting up a Cash App, a PayPal, a Venmo, something like that, and then just whoever is running it then goes and either like deposits it into the accounts of the people who are in need or cashes it out and then gets cash to the people in need or buys what they need. So there are a lot of different ways to do this. The most important thing is that it is happening and that it is being handled correctly. It sucks that we have to live in a space where money is the most important thing, but right now that is what stands between a lot of people and basic survival. So contributing to this is huge, 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 cannot be overstated. I love you. I'm proud of you. It's exhausting. It's infuriating. Let's keep going. All right, part 2 of things you can do that make a political impact that isn't just voting. Let's do it. And hey, do you like my kufia? This is just one of the 4 that I've bought at this place. It's owned by people from the watermelon place, and any money that I make from these videos is going directly back to the watermelon place. Even just clicking and scrolling up and down for a bit can help. And today we're going to talk about gardening. We have been told a fantastic lie that we have to depend on grocery stores for our fruits and vegetables and all this other stuff. It is a lie. A majority of the corporations that are in charge of crops have a monopoly on them, and they are also often in horrible conditions and human rights violations, all in the name of making a profit. They are not doing things the most efficiently and effective way. They are also creating this idea of convenience. So they're growing things in places that aren't necessarily in season other places and then shipping it out, which just creates a lot of emission. Like there's so much pollution because people have forgotten how to live in harmony with the land and know that it's just like sometimes we're gonna have to give up something to be able to do the right thing. Like the way that we treat strawberries and bananas and apples as like a year-round fruit, they're suffering at the hands of that. I'm also super privileged. I have my house, so I have a yard that I'm able to garden in, but there are so many ways to garden, and whatever works for you is the right way to do it. There's chaos gardening, which is just kind of like throwing seeds and seeing what happens. There's permaculture, which is like growing things in certain ways that can maybe lessen the amount of tending that things need along the line. There is container growing, there's growing things in garden beds, and just a whole bunch more stuff that you can look into. You can buy produce from the store, save the seeds, wash them, dry them, and then plant them. You can check out seed libraries, whether at your local library, thrift stores sometimes have them, or gardening groups in your community. There are also, of course, community gardens, so make sure you're looking around and seeing if there is space available there, or just how to get involved in things like upkeep. There's seriously like no better feeling than being able to grow food and not only sustain like your household, but being able to share it with your community and doing things like filling the community fridges, giving it to people who haven't had a meal or don't have access to things like that, and making sure that we are getting like nutritious food. Like that's amazing. And being able to spend time outside if possible, being able to learn about the earth and life cycles and all these amazing things. It's so beneficial in so many ways. The most important thing about gardening is understanding that like with this connection to land and being able to grow and create food and stability in this way, or whatever you are doing with it, we need to be fighting for land back for Indigenous people. One of the most effective, important things that we could do for the environment is giving land back to Indigenous people. They are the rightful stewards of this land. They are connected to it. They know it, like in their bones and their ancestry and their stories. They know how to take care of this land. And right now it is being completely ruined to the point where sometimes crops just like don't grow. And these corporations are also creating false scarcity by wasting food. So we have to fight for land back, not just because it is the right thing to do. It is justice. It would be a step closer to liberation, but because it would benefit all of us and the earth itself. So make sure that when you are gardening, you always remember that land back. It's not fair in a lot of ways that we have to live in the times that we live in. It's hard and it's every day, but I'm so proud of you. And it's really important that you're here. Let's keep going.
Yes, so much this. I forgot to add this. Finding a place that has things like native grasses and native flowers or whatever it may be for your area is hugely beneficial to pollinators and wildlife and the environment. Replacing your lawn, tearing up that grass, getting some native grasses in there, some flowers. In my area, especially like things like milkweed and prairie grass and certain wildflowers is huge. And you get to make a ton of friends with all the bees, and it's great. And if you have a garden, that's just going to increase the amount of pollination that your crops get, which is hugely beneficial. So yes, all this. Boo!
Let's do it. It's part 3 of things you can do to make a political impact that isn't just voting. And hey, do you like my kufia? So do I. I have 4 of them, and I got them from this place down there. Go ahead and click and scroll. Get yourself something nice. You deserve it. It's watermelon owned, and anything that I make off these videos is going directly back to the watermelon place. And I gotta be honest about today. Some of you aren't going to like it because it's about these guys. Yeah, masking makes a political difference in a lot of different ways. Number one is obviously that COVID isn't going anywhere. Eradicating disease in our modern age is really hard, especially when a majority of the world doesn't have access to comprehensive healthcare, and even then dealing with things like a lack of access to supplies for hospitals around the world, even if they do have universal healthcare. We've been fed so much mis and disinformation on COVID, but the research coming out about it is really scary. It is being compared to HIV because it wipes your immune system so bad. Long COVID is like completely debilitating and it's recognized as a disability, but there isn't really a lot in place to prevent it because people aren't being told to mask. But there are studies that show that an N95 mask can cut the emission rate by like nearly 100%. The thing is, everyone has to be masking, and we also have to be updating infrastructure for things like air filtration systems and ventilation, which we don't really have a lot of, but need to be put in place like yesterday. Plus, this is just the newest pandemic. We're staring down the barrel of a couple that are on the way, and we all need to be doing what we can to make sure that we are protected, and not only protecting ourselves, but protecting our community. People who are disabled and immunocompromised, elderly, they've been really left to rot in this pandemic, and people are really adopting a very eugenics-centric rhetoric around the whole thing of, well, it's fine if they die because they're elderly, it's fine if they die because they're disabled, it's fine, blah, 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 and coming up with reasons as to why people's lives matter less somehow. So make sure you're not falling for that, because when the government is withholding information about a health crisis, you can guarantee a lot of people are going to suffer. A lot of people are going to suffer. We are still seeing COVID-related deaths in the thousands, like every week. And right now, like there's been this huge like fall quote unquote spike, but the reality is it just hasn't ever really stopped. In addition to all of that, we're seeing mask bans. And of course, politicians are going to say that this is not about health issues. This is about people who are wearing masks as an excuse to hide their identities and commit violent crime. That's not true. If anything, people might be wearing masks at things like protests, particularly pro-Pally protests, because the threats that they are facing, whether it's violence or some kind of retaliation, have been huge. I mean, we all saw what happened on college campuses during those protests, right? Like, people are facing severe consequences just for speaking out against genocide. So these mask bans, like, we have politicians saying, like, oh, if you have a legitimate health condition, okay, but that means that what? We have to carry around some kind of doctor's note all the time to prove to someone who may or may not believe us that we need to be wearing these masks? How's that going to work? I don't think it will. So wearing a mask is not just about public health and protection, it is also about solidarity, because if a mask ban goes up in place, we know that the first people who are going to be targeted are going to be the people who are the most oppressed and marginalized. So anyone who's non-white or
Oh, is it time for part 4 already?
things you can do that make a political impact that isn't just voting. As always, give a little click, a little scroll, get yourself something nice, get something for a friend. Everything I've gotten here has been amazing. I've had nothing but great experiences, and it is watermelon owned. Anything I make from these videos is going back to the watermelon place. Let's talk about trading and bartering. We've really lost the art of the barter and trade because we, 600 years ago, were put in this system of capitalism, and they were just like, yep, this is how it works now. But it doesn't have to. A while back, I remember a video went viral a few times and probably kind of cycles through virality, and it was someone who had made homemade focaccia to exchange for, I think it was a printer, and that is trading and bartering. This is what we can do. This is what we can offer each other. Don't discount yourself and think that you have nothing to offer in a trade and barter system, because once we are able to forget this conditioning and actually put value to the things that we are able to do, then I think we can expand this in really amazing ways. So maybe it is cooking and baking that you're able to trade for, or making art, or graphic design. Maybe you're a really good writer and you could do something like a short story or a writer's workshop, or help people with their cover letters or resumes. You can also maybe do electrical work or plumbing, different house repairs and projects, or construction, furniture repair, sewing your own clothes, or mending things. And then you could even get into things like plant care or child care, pet care, house sitting, landscaping, like whatever skill that you either have already honed, or maybe it's one that you're working on, or just some labor that you're willing to give, that can be part of trading and bartering. And even online, if you're working with someone online and you're like, hey, I can't pay you monetarily, but I have these things that I could trade with you, or I would be able to help you out with, writing or graphic design or website design or customer service or whatever it may be, I think is huge. And when we are able to circumvent the system, big changes can be made. One thing that I think people could start doing is going around to local businesses and just seeing who would be willing to trade and barter, and making note of them, maybe making a community spreadsheet. And that way you can also be this person is going to trade and barter for these things, or this person is operating on a sliding scale within these ranges of payment, or this person can even set up payment plans, just so we are able to know who's going to be working with us on an economic level and a community level, and not just being this is a set price and blah, 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 blah. And I will say, there's nothing wrong with that. If you are someone who is selling a service or a product, whatever it may be, there's nothing wrong with having set prices, and I want you to value what you do. I think this is just another way that some people will be able to work within the system, but also outside of it. As we know, the way that capitalism works is it's not a whole lot of trickle down. It's mostly siphoning up from wage theft and draining us of our resources and increasing inflation and debt and all of these things like cost of living. Anything that we are able to do to ease those burdens is huge and valuable. So don't discount yourself in this. There is something you have to offer, and there is something that can be done about it. I love you so much. I'm so part 5 of things that you can do that make a political impact that isn't just voting. Hey, give a click, give a scroll, get yourself something nice. This place is watermelon owned, and anything that I make from these videos is going directly back to the watermelon place. This one might be a little bit of a tangent and a little bit off the rails, but stick with me, I promise. There's a point. We have to fall in love with life. We have to find joy, and we have to find pleasure. Oh, hey, but don't you have a bunch of comorbid mental illnesses and neurodivergences that make it really hard to love your life? Yeah, yep. I didn't say it was going to be easy. I said we got to do it. This is an ongoing thing for a lot of us. I think that we are told that, being happy comes just from making certain choices. But once we start to untangle that, we see that a lot of these choices are actually expectations, and a lot of them relate back to this capitalistic, white supremacist, often puritanical foundation that we really need to start cleaning out. Capitalism tells us that we can't find joy unless we spend money. And this like white supremacist puritanicalism tells us that we can't find joy if we are operating outside of whiteness, outside of being cis, being heterosexual, being like all of these just like falling into gender roles and falling into tradition. Like we are told that happiness doesn't exist beyond these things, but I promise you it does. So some of this is going to relate back to our sexuality and our sexual relationships and being able to deconstruct how we've been told that we can't exist and find pleasure outside of marriage, outside of cis-het marriage that is meant for like focused on reproduction and like reinforcing gender roles. But pleasure can be found in so many different ways and so many different expressions of sexuality, expressions of kink, expressions of gender, expressions of whatever it may be. And most importantly, pleasure is not only found in sex. And yeah, I'm a sex educator, but my goal is not just making sure that people have all this information and are able to express themselves sexually. I want people to find pleasure and train our brains to be seeking out these pleasures that we can find. For instance, maybe you really like certain smells or tastes, or just like you have a favorite time of day. You have this routine that you really like that doesn't cost you money. That is your joy. That is your pleasure. And it's where we need to be reconnecting with ourselves. A really good exercise or something like this is to list the 5 senses. So sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And just write down things that you like of those things. It doesn't have to be sexual. It doesn't have to be non-sexual. It can be whatever you want. And just start thinking of how you can incorporate those things into your life on a more regular basis and take notice of it. Because in doing that, you're going to actually train your brain to be seeking these things out, finding more joy, finding more pleasure. And that's going to make a huge difference. We can absolutely make the decision to stop buying our happiness. In some ways, there isn't necessarily going to be a way to stop buying things altogether, right? We need to survive, and currently our society has said that our survival depends on our participation to a certain point. But in the ways that we can circumvent that we can stop participating, is going to be huge. So finding joy in things like going for a walk, maybe in the woods or by a body of water, or maybe finding joy in creating some art, spending time with loved ones, cooking, messing around with makeup, honestly, like sure, spend a little bit of time on TikTok, take care of some plants, do a puzzle, find these things that exist outside of consumerism, outside of the economy, and get back to that, because our social structure is basically like you work and you go home, but even while you're at home, you're participating in purchasing something, and that is the only way you can be happy. It is just like this robotic, like going through the motions, whatever. But that's not living, that's existing. And more than that, it's existing under the conditions that others have dictated onto you. And we don't have to do that. So if you're watching this and you're thinking about like, oh man, like I really feel disconnected from my sexual expression, I can help with that if you want, but there are also a ton of resources that I can recommend, as well as the fact of like, if you're watching this and you're just thinking like, man, I want a hobby and not have to monetize it. Like, yes, follow that. We just need to be making sure that we are appreciating and enjoying our life and not just sort of like sifting through it. Because honestly, like the people who are in charge, they don't give a shit if we're having a good time. But if we are having a good time, we have something to fight for, especially if it's not something you can buy. Like you can't buy watching the sunrise. You can't buy the smell of like your grandma's bread recipe being made after you've had a really hard day. You can't buy the feeling of your dog running up to you when you get home. Like all of these things that are just not purchasable. So when we are able to invest in our joy and our pleasure, as opposed to like spending money to get us a dopamine hit for a while and then it goes away, really big moves can be made there. And that's when we start to fall in love with our life again, when we realize what is possible beyond this system. I love you and I'm proud of you. I'm really glad that you're here with me. It makes... All right, it's time for part 6 of things you can do to make a political impact that isn't just voting. Want one of these? You should get one. Even just clicking and scrolling might help. Besides, they make great gifts for yourself, for friends, for family, whatever you like. It's watermelon owned, and anything I make is going right back to the watermelon place. This video is for people who look like me. But honestly, it's probably information that everyone could use. We have to take our egos out of it. I think that there are a lot of really well-intentioned white people, and that's great. Yay. But we have to understand that when people of color, people of global majority, don't want to work with us, or take time to trust us, or just don't trust us as a matter of principle, that it's not about us as an individual, probably, right? I mean, you might be a horrible, shitty person, but for the most part, if people hold to the value of like not trusting white people, maybe taking time to work with white people or not working with white people, that is so valid. It's not about us. When we start like doubling down and saying things like, oh, I'm different, I'm not like that, that just sounds like you're saying the not all men rhetoric, right? Not all white people. Some of my best friends are black. Like, you're not helping, right? And I think particularly, like I'm non-binary femme, I was socialized as a woman my whole life. I don't love the word woman for myself, but whatever. White femmes and women, if we can understand why other women and femmes pick the bear, you know, if you're lost in the woods or like just walking in the woods, would you rather run into a bear or a man? Most people pick the bear, right? We are the man in that instance for people of global majority, for non-white people. We are the bear, okay? It's not that it's us personally, it's that it's a risk they aren't willing to take. Because we as white people, even as white women, maybe especially as white women, pose a direct threat, okay? Because the minute we decide, if we were to decide, we could immediately find ways to make their lives more difficult, to ruin their lives, to perpetuate violence onto them, and even kill them. Of course, I'm hoping that if you are on my page, you are also an anti-racist white person and an activist that would never fucking do that. The problem is, words are not actions. And if we do not act in ways that prove that we are safe, that we are allies, that we are wanting to be in solidarity with non-white people, how are they supposed to know that? Like, just ask yourself that. Need I remind you the amount of white women throughout history who have been responsible for getting black people in particular, but any non-white person, arrested, lynched, killed, like reputation ruined, house destroyed, like all of these things. And it's literally just because we as white women hold so much power over non-white people, particularly non-white men, and even more particularly black men. And there's no better example of that than Emmett Till. Emmett Till was a fucking child, and a random white woman was made uncomfortable by the fact that he existed, claimed that he was inappropriate towards her. And he was murdered in ways that to this day, like, horrific. His mother could only identify him by the jewelry on his hand and not his face, because it had been so disfigured. And every one of those people responsible was exonerated, acquitted. Because the life of an innocent black child was seen as less valuable than the perception of safety for a white woman. So we have to do the work and understand that it's not about us, okay? We need to be centering voices that have these experiences and that matter, and decenter ourselves. Because while we are in this fight together as the working class, the intersections of oppression matter. And the more intersections that you're met at, the more that your voice is going to be shut out. So the more that we as allies and people in solidarity need to be doing to uplift them and to center them. We as white people need to be talking to that cop that lives in our head, and we need to cut it out, okay? Because we have been so conditioned to think that our safety, our perception of being safe, is our life. And if that comes under threat, then we are at threat of death. No. No. Another huge thing we need to do is, unless there is like truly no other option, stop calling the police on people, regardless of the situation. Because even for white folks, that can turn into a fatal encounter. So we need to recognize that, and recognize how many people.
Part 7 of things that you can do that make a political impact that isn't just voting.
And hey, do you like this kufiya? It's Palestinian owned and made at this little shop right down here. Give a click and give a scroll. Maybe add something to your cart. You never know. Besides, they make great gifts for yourself, family, friends. Holidays are coming up, and what better way to do it than supporting the watermelon place? Anything that I make from these videos is going directly back to the watermelon place. Can I talk to you guys about libraries? Yep, using your library is a political thing, and it could really make a big difference. A lot of the times, libraries are funded based on how often people use them. So even just going, getting a card, and hanging out, that can really help, because it shows that people are using the place. And whether it could be for something like a heating or cooling center during the more extreme temperatures, people can host classes and workshops there. You can bring your kids there. Maybe they have like a story time or a movie day, something like that. Libraries have so much to offer. A lot of the times, libraries are the only place that a lot of people can get access to the internet, or even access to a bathroom or water. So when you use it and you contribute to that funding, it makes a huge difference. And I'm sure a lot of people have noticed, maybe in their own communities, that libraries are getting defunded and closing. And that's a big problem because of all the reasons I just mentioned and so many more. Like, how else are people supposed to get access to things like free audiobooks or free books, or be able to submit resumes and print things and do research and get maps and learn about all of these things? Some libraries even have programs for adult literacy, so people who never learned how to read can finally start learning how. These things are huge and essential. And by supporting your library, you're supporting those programs. A lot of libraries are also going to have things like community closets or community fridges. All you have to do is ask. Maybe you could even help start one. Plus, it's a really great option to be able to divest from things like that one site that, started as a bookstore and now it's kind of an everything store and ruining everything for everyone. You can even use an app called Libby, and you can rent books onto your phone, including audiobooks. It's huge, and I love it. Libraries are so important. So please use them and thank your librarians, because a lot of the times this work is thankless and fighting an uphill battle against people who want to strip them of all their funding. Check out a site or anything like that. See what kind of events your library is putting on. See if you can offer some yourself, and truly just tell people to use their libraries and tell them that their funding is related to how many people are using them. Because I bet a lot of people just don't know that and want to do their best to support. We're all in this as a group. It's not fair that we have to keep thinking outside of the system like this, but I know we can do it, and I know that. Part 8 of things you can do to make a political difference that isn't just voting. Today's a really hard day, I know, but we rest, we tend to ourselves, we tend to each other, and we get going. This work, we have to be in it for the long haul, and it's going to be hard, but I really think it's going to be worth it, and that we can do this. If you want to help the watermelon place, then you can click on this link, you can scroll, or you can add something to your cart. You don't have to get it, but even just doing that can help, and it'll spread the word best it can. Anything I make off of these videos for commission is going directly back to the watermelon place. Take a first aid class. There are street medic classes, there are basic life-saving classes, CPR and AED classes, there are even some veterinary care classes or some mental psychological intervention classes. I think that we should be taking them. Having people who are actually trained to deal with any type of emergency, particularly if it is de-escalation and negotiation and being able to meet people who are in a crisis where they're at emotionally and calm them down, is huge. Huge. Do not underestimate the influence of that. There are usually classes in communities that can maybe be taken at fire stations or churches. The Red Cross often has some, which I know the Red Cross is kind of hit or miss as an organization for a lot of folks, but the classes would be available. Sometimes there are providers who offer classes for free, and I think if you are a healthcare provider of any kind or have any kind of skill, that setting up a donation-based class or doing it for free could be really, really beneficial for people in your community. Plus, it gives you a chance to get to know folks. It could be really good if you have the ability and time and all that goodness that goes with it. For a lot of people, we need to understand that calling emergency services is not an option, or at least a last result. Even if it's for medical care or even fire, sometimes people would rather not call someone because it could turn into a fatal encounter. And when we are able to start there and recognize that for some people, it's not just about getting help, it's about who is coming to supposedly give the help and if they can even be trusted to get there in time. So as we divest from those systems, we need to be making sure that we have the capacity to be building new ones. Typically, these classes are either going to be free, donations-based, or probably $50 or under. If you're able to take them, I highly recommend them. Otherwise, you can also maybe look for educators online. They might be uploading videos or guides and some basic tips that might be able to help. For instance, like when giving CPR, they don't recommend that you do breaths anymore and instead stick to chest compressions. And you're going to be wanting to do, I believe it's 100 beats a minute. And there are playlists on Spotify and YouTube of songs with that beat. So it can help you keep that beat if you are administering CPR for someone. Things are scary. I get that. But now is our chance to prove that we can show up. We owe our endurance and our hope and our compassion and our revolutionary optimism. We owe it to this. My oh my, how time does fly, and we're already on part 9 of things that you can do to make a political impact that isn't just voting. Anything that I earn from this goes directly back to the watermelon place, and it's watermelon owned, and when you buy something, you can show your support for the watermelon place. You can use it as apparel or decor, whatever you like. They make amazing gifts, and it's just really important to show solidarity, and it can be for a really good cause, so if you feel compelled, go for it. Today, I am going to talk about the expenditure of not only our money, but our attention. Also, side note, I'm autistic, and it's like to the point that I don't enjoy making eye contact with the camera. And I'm outside, so there's just like a lot to look at. So that's why I don't look the whole time. But anyway, we need to be a lot more discerning about where we are spending money, how we are spending money, and what we invest time, energy, and our attention into. Like, there's Black Friday coming up, right? And Cyber Monday. And I've spoken before on like the importance of finding pleasure outside of consumerism. And I think this is a really good example of maybe talking to your friends and family about doing like a thrifting holiday or a regifting, like trading things that you already have holiday, or a DIY holiday, so outside of just consumption. And I don't want to say that like you don't deserve nice new things, or people don't deserve to be treating themselves or like taking advantage of deals when they see them. I think that's all well and good. I just think as a culture, we have been taught that that's how we gain happiness, that's how we gauge success, and we don't have to do that, especially when the people who benefit are the corporate overlords that are literally benefiting off of suffering. So this also is going to go for brands and celebrities and influencers. Block them. If they have shit views, if they have not spoken out about the watermelon place or this election or the amount of like crises we are facing, if they are just like, oh, I don't get involved in politics, whatever, like they are not your friend. Like this parasocial relationship that we have with celebrity and influence and brands, we got to end it. We got to make sure that we are living within our values with our time and our energy and our attention and our money. So making sure that you're doing things like following independent artists and creators, people who don't make you feel bad about yourself. Part of what I do as a sex and relationship coach and educator is tell people to unfollow every account that makes you feel like you're not good enough. Like if they're trying to sell you something about like beauty, fitness, wellness, whatever, that makes you feel like shit, they don't deserve your time and attention. Block them. Supporting people who are outspoken about these issues is important because it proves to people in charge that they can still have a career, that they can still make money, that they can still be relevant. I mean, Macklemore, right? Had to move inside because my dogs were barking. But this also goes for like divesting from streaming, I think is a big thing, because not only are these corporations like constantly like checking up prices and changing rules on password sharing and like taking things offline with no notice, like what the fuck is that? So buying things like VHS and DVD and CDs, I think is gonna make a big comeback, as well as for us in my age range maybe getting back to our roots upon sailing the high seas, me mateys. Because we shouldn't have to completely go without media, right? But divesting our attention from media that is, you know, presenting misinformation, that is sowing division, that is apolitical. It's always political, right? Ignoring things is a political choice that benefits oppressors. And we can just say, no, I'm not gonna do that anymore. And I'm not saying you have to do everything right away. It can be little steps here and there. I mean, you know, everything I do in this series, it's about what you can personally do and make a difference with. It's not about mandating everything for everyone. From each according to ability, to each according to need. So to summarize, look into what brands, what artists, what creators, what merch, whatever it may be, what companies align with your values and ones that don't. Like, a big example for me is like, maybe stop giving money to Chick-fil-A because number one, it's not that good. It's literally not that good. And two, they actively fund hate groups and conversion therapy. And why are we giving them our money? Why are we doing that? Stop. It's going to be hard and weird as we start navigating these systems, but we vote every time we buy something. I don't like remember I was 6, but after 9/11, Bush went on TV and was like, the best thing you can do right now is shop, go shopping, go buy stuff. And it was because they wanted to stimulate the economy. And it's like, if we decided to actually like buy things within our value system, we could make a lot of change. And again, another note, like capitalism exists to make us feel kind of helpless. And there are some times we literally have to participate in shitty things, right? Like sometimes we do have to go to Walmart because it's just where we can find the cheapest thing and we don't have enough money. And I get that, but it is about, like I said, doing what you can, not trying to do everything. I love you and I'm proud of you, and this work was gonna have.
Oh my goodness, it's part 10 already?
Things you can do to make a political impact that isn't just voting. Anything I make from these videos is going directly back to the Watermelon Place. Plus, these are from people from the Watermelon Place. Support an amazing cause and get an amazing gift. Let's talk about AI. I need y'all to stop using it. At least stop using it for frivolous purposes, for writing essays or like writing letters for convenience. Stop using it. Not only is it mostly stealing from artists and writers, it is also costing so much in water. The servers that all are like needed to crank out all of this AI generated shit uses so much water because they have to keep cool. So every time you use ChatGPT or generate a photo of whatever, that's like throwing away a bottle of water. And obviously that adds up, especially for people who use it every day or are just like reloading shit. Like we don't need it. It's bad. Please stop using it. the amount of like art that is generated by AI is truly just theft. It's just taking images that are already on the internet with certain tags and descriptions and just uploading them there. It's just stealing from the artist to make this computer generated image. And it's costing a lot of money. It's really bad for the environment. It's making people like lose the ability to see what's real and what's not. Like, I think we all experienced a few older people completely baffled by the fact that something was AI generated and not real. To the point where, honestly, I think if you see someone using something with AI, you're well within your right to just shame them. Just explain to them, like, that's bad. We really shouldn't be doing it. It's bad for us as people. It's bad for the environment. It is bad for artists. It's bad for creators. Stop. But then there's this AI that can like detect cancer cells years before they grow into a tumor. That's what we should be using it for. We shouldn't be using it to infringe on people's ability to create things. We should be using it to further our ability to help people, because there are ways that it can do that. But how are we going to figure out how it can help people if all we're using it for is like writing emails or making these generated images of like, what would I look like if I lived in Victorian England? Like, we don't need it. We have artists who can do shit like that. So do that instead, and don't use this weird computer shit that is almost certainly going to be like hacked by white supremacist governments to further push their far-right agendas via computers. Via are both right? Anyway, I know that all of this stuff is really complicated and hard. Part 12 of things that you can do to make a political impact that isn't just voting. If you want something like this, go here. You can click and scroll, and maybe that'll help other people figure out that they also want something from there. It's Pally owned, and I am going to be splitting a majority of what I make to go to Pally. Unfortunately, due to capitalism and the fact that we have to pay to exist, means that I've run into some bills and expenses lately. That means that I can't give 100% of everything that I make, and I do have to make sure that I'm still taking care of myself and my family. Moving forward, I'm hoping to do sort of a rotating basis so that every month or so I'm able to take a majority of my funds, 60% or more of what I make, to be going not only to Pally, but also Sudan, Syria, Congo, Haiti, Sierra Leone, and various causes that I give to, as well as local organizations. But let's get into this political action. I'll start by saying I by no means am endorsing anyone engage in any behavior that is going to get them into trouble, that is going to be legally dicey, that is going to be dangerous. I'm not endorsing that. However, I am suggesting that you become a bit of a public menace. Now, let me explain. I don't want anyone to be doing harm to anyone. I want you to become a bit of a thorn in the side of people in power, or people whose values don't align with basic morality and humanity. There are a lot of different ways to do this. For instance, you could get in touch with your city council or your local politicians or more and call and write and fax. There are apps like 5Calls and ResistBot and so many others where you can basically send a pre-written letter on a wide variety of issues and send it to all of your representatives, and it's really easy. And when we sort of all come together and decide to do this like daily or multiple times a day and just flood the lines, they can't help but take notice. Just make sure you're including all of the information that's requested, because then they actually count it towards a tally of people calling in about certain issues. And if you don't, they may not. And attached to that would also be showing up to city council meetings if you're able. A lot of times at city council meetings, they reserve time for constituents to speak, and what a great time to be able to talk to people. You not only can address city council, but you can address everyone who's there. Sometimes they're live streamed or posted online. You can address your whole city. And this could be about different issues. It could be about the ongoing G-sides. It could be about different initiatives that your city council is working towards, or issues in your community that are going unheard or unnoticed. That's a huge platform, and I think you should definitely take advantage of it if that is something you're able to do. You can also even get in touch with your inner Karen, just not in the racist way. Leaving reviews for things, highly effective. If you go to whatever and leave reviews not only for places that you support and you want more people to be aware of those things, but also for places that are maybe profiting off of pain or voting for the wrong things or are just aligned with values that are causing harm. Leave reviews. Let people know that this is someplace that they either should or shouldn't be taking their business to. Yeah, there are some places that might delete the review, and that really sucks, but sometimes even leaving a review and getting a response, depending on what it is, can be more telling on them and the kind of establishment that they run than anything you could say. And while we're talking about business, I would also say maybe your local reps have someplace that they really like to go, and maybe you're there sometimes too. Agitating their piece while they are able to pass legislation and like move forward with certain initiatives and espouse certain rhetoric shouldn't go just completely ignored and unimpeded. Maybe approaching them while they're having a meal or going golfing or whatever it is that like politicians like to do. You as a constituent can go up and talk to them, ask them why they're doing certain things, ask them why they're taking money from certain places or sending money to certain places, because their job is to be a public servant. So you can ask them if they're serving the public. And those are just a few examples. You can also do things like putting up posters, looking into wheat paste, and distributing resources to community fridges. It is always a good idea to have multiple versions. Talk to someone if you don't speak the other like prominent languages in your area. Talk to someone who does to translate things to make it more accessible, and just really make yourself known as someone in the community who isn't going to stand for stuff that is so harmful. And of course, this is all about what is accessible to you, what you have the mental, physical. Part 11 in this economy, it's more likely than you may think. Things that you can do to make a political impact that isn't just voting. Anything I make from these videos goes back here. And it's from people who are from here. So go ahead, give a click, give a scroll, get yourself something. I've made a video on this before, and it's so important that I'm going to do it again. It's public health. I talked before about the importance of masking. That is still hugely important, not only to protect against COVID and other respiratory diseases, but it can also protect against allergens and air pollution, and it can also protect against the AI that's kind of, looking at you. Right now, as we watch this cabinet get built for the next administration, there are implications. The man who's going to be in charge of public health is like a known conspiracy theorist and anti-vaxxer, and that's going to have some really dangerous ramifications, because it's going to mean that people think that getting vaccinated is like completely optional and they're going to opt out. But I am begging you, do not opt out, get vaccinated. Vaccines are proven to be effective. Yes, vaccine injuries happen, and that's really scary and unfortunate. They're also really, really rare. And for the most part, we just need to be making sure that the people who can get vaccinated are getting vaccinated, because there are plenty of people who can't, whether it's for being immunocompromised or having an allergy to something in the vaccine, or because they don't have access to it, whether it's because of money or insurance or like a lack of doses in their community. Universal healthcare is also something we really need to be pushing for, because that would mean that hopefully more people get access to the vaccines that they need. You can look up the recommended schedules for different vaccines. Basically, some of the most important are you're going to want to get Tdap every 10 years or so. You're going to want to get measles, I believe, every 5 to 10 years. I'd have to double check. And you're going to want a flu shot and a COVID shot every year. COVID, it may even end up being 6 months to 12 months, basically because it's mutating so much that they want to make sure that the vaccines they're given are for the appropriate strains. There are now like thousands of strains of COVID because we've kind of let it run rampant, and it just keeps mutating. And it's really scary because sometimes they are not as strong and sometimes they are really strong. So make sure you're getting your vaccines at the appropriate time and staying safe. Public health is also going to be about access to water and food that is acceptable to eat and drink. And people are going to be saying a lot about fluoride. That's not the problem in our water. The problem in our water is pollution and runoff from factories and factory farms. And that is why we are seeing like a lot of cancer rates go up in areas that are by big farms, because literal animal shit is poisoning our water. We also have a lot of like additives and chemicals and pesticides that in America we use to maybe increase the bounty of something, or like have things look a certain way or change the flavor or whatever. And a lot of them are known carcinogens. And what's really scary is because of the Chevron doctrine being overturned and the way that things are looking for like the FDA and all these different health departments, is that we aren't really going to know what's happening to our food, and that these corporations and things are just going to kind of be allowed to put in whatever they want. So make sure that you are keeping an eye on the ingredients of different foods, especially if they're highly processed. I know for me, being autistic, it can be really hard to just be eating like a cleaner diet, as it would be called, of like just produce and whole grains and, you know, like no antibiotic, organic meat, blah, 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 whatever. Like that isn't always possible for me. Sometimes I need processed foods just because that's what I'm going to eat. That's what my body's going to let me eat. But making sure that you are keeping aware of like the different things that are in your food and stuff like that is going to be really important. Other aspects of public health is things like oppression. Public health operates on the ability to live and raise kids in a safe environment that is not only like mitigating the spread of disease, but is also not oppressing people. It's not risking people's lives. It's making sure that people are housed and clothed and fed and have access to the necessary healthcare. So this is going to include racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, Islamophobia, police brutality, being unhoused. Like all of these things relate to public health. We live in a severely ableist society because we kind of expect disabled people just to shuffle into the corner so we don't have to think about them. And that's not doing anyone any good. We need to make sure that disabled people are able to experience life just like the rest of us. The ADA, while it is in theory supposed to make places more accessible for disabled people, it's not often enforced, or it is just requiring like the bare minimum. So if like a building has a garbage ramp, they label it as a wheelchair ramp. It's not effective at all. I also urge you to consider emergency protocol in the case of a disabled person, because heartbreakingly, there's not a lot that is done for them. A lot of schools have no standard protocol in the case of an active pew-pew situation for disabled people. A lot of times it's close the blinds, lock the doors, and leave them there. Sometimes this is even true for events like fires. Like they just have no sense of what to do with a disabled person if an emergency happens. We need to be living our lives in a way that acknowledges that most people are going to be disabled at one point or another. That could be accident or illness or whatever it may be. Someone is going to need some type of accessibility in their lives. Don't think, this is a quote from Crutches and Spice, Imani Barbarin, don't think that just because your disability is catered to, that you are not disabled. For instance, I wear contacts and I have glasses. That is still a disability. My eyes don't work right? So I get contacts and I get glasses. I'm still disabled by that. And likewise, I'm neurodivergent. I'm on an antidepressant and I am on a stimulant for my ADHD. I'm still disabled, even though I have access to those things. And I don't want people living their lives thinking nothing could ever happen to them, because the fact of the matter is shit happens, and we can't afford to just devalue disabled life because it's not convenient. With things going into place like mask bans, this is just more blatant. It's trying to funnel people who are disabled off and away so we don't have to think about them, and forcing them to live their lives in isolation. And that's not okay. Currently, we are also staring down the barrel of another pandemic. Bird flu is spreading, and it's scary and dangerous. Good news is we have vaccines being manufactured. Bad news is once it hits the public, so many people are still so anti-mask and so anti-vax that it has the potential to get really bad really quickly. And we need to be making sure that people are encouraged to understand the reality of the situation, listen to the experts, listen to people who know what they're talking about and not reading it online or trying to like cure autism with raw milk or whatever it is they're trying to do. There are absolutely methods within like herbalism and traditional Chinese medicine and things like acupuncture or Reiki or like other things. There are things that can absolutely be beneficial, but we can't solely rely on them. We have to combine methods to make sure we're getting the most protection possible. So making sure that people have access to clean water, that we know what the fuck is going on with our food, that we are able to take care of ourselves and others, advocating for people if they are experiencing oppression or obstacles to things, and making sure that public health is not just focused on like a me versus you mentality, but it's focused on the recognition of when I am able to take care of myself, I am also able to take care of you. Our health matters, and the way that we talk about it.
Number 13 of things that you can do to make a political impact that isn't just voting. Wow. Jin wants you to know that if you want something from an authentic Palestinian-owned shop, then you can go right there. And even just clicking and scrolling helps to put the information out there. Anything I make is being split and given back to Pally. Today is going to be a controversial one, so I want to make sure I'm saying up front, all of these videos are meant to be about whatever is within your ability to do, and whatever is also like in adherence with your values. So don't feel pressure if you're not able to do it, and don't try to take this as something that it's not. And just remember that we are all capable of harm. We're all going to make mistakes. It is what we do with the information and the learned experience that really matters. That all being said, it could be really, really impactful if we decide to cut back or cut out animal products like meat, dairy, and eggs. Veganism is kind of a hot button topic, and I guess I understand why, but a big part of it is just about the fact that like agriculture, especially in America, is a hugely environmentally destructive industry. To say nothing of the fact that it also is like riddled with human rights violations and like mistreatment, unnecessary cruelty of animals as well as people, and these are all things that we should be considering. In addition to the fact that like a lot of regulations are being undone, a lot of
quality control is being rolled back. Like, I think it's the pork industry that's like completely like unregulated right now, basically. And with things coming up like the bird flu and like a whole host of potential other like animal-borne illnesses, it's maybe in our best interest to cut back or cut out. I also say this as someone with ADHD and I have trouble feeding myself. I was a vegetarian for like 10 years, but eventually my like burnout and my nutritional intake, like things were coming to a head that made it harder for me to make food for myself. It made it harder for me to be healthy and not be eating meat. So there were compromises that had to be made. And I am now working again towards cutting out more animal products. But I know that sometimes I'm going to just have to prioritize eating. And sometimes that is going to look like meat or eggs or dairy or a mix. And that sucks, but it is also about being able to take care of myself. There are also just like more ethical ways that we could be consuming these things. So like looking for smaller scale farms, local farms, ones that are a bit more humane, don't have like unnecessary mistreatment of animals and, you know, all that stuff, because it's factory farming. That's like really the huge issue, because they have a ton of weird rules that don't necessarily make a lot of sense and just cause like undue stress and undue torment onto livestock. And it's very icky. And a lot of it is about like profit and cutting corners. And if you've ever read The Jungle by Upton St. Clair, you know what happens when the meat industry in particular is cutting corners and is maybe not taking all the necessary safety precautions. And it looks a lot like humans ending up in your meat, and a lot of just like awful contamination. It's also important to recognize that some cultures like eating meat and the way that they prepare it and go about it is really important to them. And I think that's fine, especially if it's like super ethical and they're using every part and they are doing it in sustainable ways. I'm all about that. And I think that we need to definitely be educating ourselves more on those topics, because they're important. And the way that people are able to ethically and sustainably practice their culture is quite often undermined and sort of legislated against. And those are things that we should really be speaking up about. I think it's also really important to understand that like there's no such thing right now as like harm-free food in this country because of the way that agricultural workers are treated. There are people growing and harvesting our food, and a lot of them are being underpaid, if they're paid at all. They're being forced to like work ridiculous hours. They're literally like field hands. And there are also instances of incarcerated people being used as slave labor for the purposes of agriculture. And these are things that we need to be talking about so we can work towards more sustainable and ethical options. Agriculture is like one of the top 3 industries that are damaging the climate. And what we need to be doing is also like nourishing our topsoil and giving land back to the people who should actually be stewarding it, which is indigenous people, and cutting back the scale of factory farming, as well as just like making it less of a demand. If we eat less meat, they don't need to make as much of it, which means there's less farmland that is going towards livestock, which also means like less water and less corn and soybeans that's being grown for their feed. It is way more sustainable to be on a vegetarian or vegan diet, but I know that health options and culture and like just what is accessible based on price, I know that that's not going to be feasible for everyone, and that's okay. From each according to ability to each according to need. We're not going to be able to do everything just ourselves, but oh, hello, we didn't see you come in. It must be time for part 14 already. If you want to support a Pally-owned business and get something that talks about your support for Pally, you can go ahead and click and scroll right here. Anything I make is going to be split and given to a family I'm sponsoring in Pally, right? And today we're going to talk about learning a trade. Trades are basically just jobs that require specific training, but not necessarily a degree in that area. Some examples would be like being a mechanic or a plumber or a mason, contractor, working construction, working as like installing solar panels. It can also be things like making fabric or sewing or furniture repair, being a tailor, like, you know, all that kind of stuff. Learning a trade can be, first off, way more accessible than anything like a 4-year college or even a 2-year college. Like there are people who simply cannot get higher education because of how it's gatekept, whether it's through price or location or systemic oppression, whatever it may be. School just doesn't function the way it used to, and it doesn't even guarantee you a job at the end of it anymore. Meanwhile, we are seeing more and more people turn to trades and make a pretty decent living. Plus, if you go into a trade, you might be able to help unionize your workplace, but don't tell them that I told you that. Learning a trade can be super beneficial when you are wanting to shift into a barter system as well. I mean, it's literally called trading and bartering, right? So like if you are an electrician or you know how to do electrical work, things like that, that's something that you can provide to your community. You could even like maybe teach a few lessons on like basic stuff so people can become more self-sufficient. It's also a really great way to just go around and help people with basic repairs without absolutely price gouging them to the point where they can't afford to be safe in their own homes or have to buy all new systems. Trades could also be something like sewing and teaching people how to do like basic repairs for their clothes and their upholstery and make their own stuff. That's a huge thing that we should be like putting our attention towards because of how much pollution and human rights violations and just awful shit go on in the fashion industry, particularly with brands like Shein and Runway or whatever it is. Like, oof, there's a lot there. Avoid fast fashion in general. Thrift instead and repair or make the clothes that you want. By learning a trade, we are able to divest from systems of capitalism that tell us that we need to keep buying things or that allow for us to be completely raked over the coals in terms of how much things cost to update or replace or just get done in general. Absolutely make sure that when you hire a trade worker, you're paying them what they are worth. Just don't go to like companies that have set prices that aren't accurately reflecting what the person who's doing the work is going to be making or what it's even worth. So make sure you're doing your research on things like that. Going local and like small businesses, local people, independent contractors makes a huge difference. And if you're not able to necessarily learn a new trade, maybe just try practicing a small skill that could be beneficial to people. It might even just be having a passing familiarity with something so you're able to pass on the information. I want to make sure that people don't feel like they have to do everything or that they won't have any place in the revolution. We all have a place, we all have a role. It's just going to look different for some people, and that's okay. I love you. I'm proud of you. It's time for 15 things that you can do to make a political difference beyond just voting. If you want to support a Pally-owned shop and get something to proudly wear your support of Pally, go ahead and click there. If you can't afford anything, that's fine, because if you just click and scroll or add something to your cart, it can help push this out to other people. Anything I make is going to be split and given to the family that I help out in Pally. You can read all about them in the bio. Today is something pretty cool and pretty simple. You gotta make art. You gotta be creative. You gotta find an outlet that lets you express yourself, and that can make all the difference. That can be hugely, hugely political. The art that you make doesn't necessarily have to have political messaging, although if you ask me, I believe that there is inherently a political message to all forms of art, even if it is not necessarily intended or overt or anything like that, because existence is political. When entire people face oppression that is completely based on who they are, on their existence, on their geography, on their beliefs, on their appearance, on their money, whatever it may be, anything that is created by them or has the inclusion of them or exclusion of them is political. And you also don't have to sell your art. You don't necessarily have to monetize it. Creating it is the important thing. There are even studies that have been done that show when we have an idea to create something and we aren't able to get it done, it can do harm to us. It can damage us because it's basically creating a what if in our brain that we aren't able to explore. We're not able to hone these skills and utilize our talent or practice or anything like that. We're not able to see how it would play out if we were able to do it. Plus, we live in a world that constantly is telling us not only do we have to be making money and hustling all the time, but we don't have time to engage in hobbies or things that bring us pleasure. And creation, being able to make art, being able to express ourselves in these ways, to build something, to really put our heart into something is always going to be put on the back burner when you're just trying to survive, when you're just trying to get through. And that's intentional on the part of the ruling class. I mean, come on, they're trying to replace creative jobs with robots and make it so people have to do the jobs that you'd think robots would be able to do. I personally don't really care about art that was made by a computer. I care about the person who's making it. They have a point of view. They have things in their life. They have passion. They have feelings. And that is what is able to be expressed through art. Plus, I mean, in previous videos, I've talked about how these robots making art are really just stealing and slightly changing art that they find on the internet from other actual artists. But creating something doesn't have to just be the traditional thing that we think of with visual art. It can be writing, it can be music, it can be building something, it can be repairing something, it can be dancing and choreographing something, it can be creating food, it can be so many different things, but it is the act of taking things and making something out of it. It is the act of bringing something into the world, and either for yourself or to share it or whatever it may be, these acts in and of itself are incredibly important. If you don't know where to start, there are plenty of creators across plenty of different platforms that you can follow. Anyone who's doing a form of art that you want to get into or a form of creation that you want to get into, follow them for any sort of tips to get started. And just the hardest part of creating is doing it. So getting started, just putting pen to paper or putting, pencil to wood and measuring things and deciding that you're going to move forward and, getting out some ingredients, whatever it may be, to create is huge and important. And it doesn't matter if you're good. It matters if you're doing it. Besides, how are you even going to get good if you don't practice? I love you so much. I'm so proud of you. It's really hard, and it's winter right now, so make sure you're being gentle with yourself. Mammals are not meant to be awake all the time during winter. We're not meant to be working this hard during winter. We're not meant to be thinking so much. You're tired because the sun is resting. The world is resting, and you should be too. Take care of you because you are needed.